As you know, there have been issues that have come up also in the course of the week about waste bins that are not needed by the assemblies. The assemblies already have thousands of waste bins that are sitting in their premises and that are deteriorating. Manasseh Azore was up to that investigations for quite a period of time and has revealed that we seem to be paying 130 million Ghana cedis more for what is overpriced, waste bins. We are now being told through the explanation by the JOSPONG group of companies that these waste bins were extra expensive because they were made with virgin material and there was also a replacement part of it, and that this was actually not outright purchase. Well, we'll get into the details of that right away, but watch or listen to this first.
Can you confirm, first of all, a few facts, that 5 companies that bid for this are owned by Josiah Japan?
Let me first of all say that these companies that you are referring to are limited liability companies. When Joy FM and Multimedia are going to bid for jobs, you remember the Star Ghana bidding during the election. Joy FM go, Joy Prime, don't you go? Asempa, don't they also go? Hey, don't they go? Is he saying that a legitimate and a limited liability company like Zoolion, the JOSPONG group, we cannot do that? When we do good things in this country, Manasseh sees absolutely nothing about it. Manasseh knows my number. He knows where to find me, and Manasseh can just decide to put out this. To me, this is clearly incongruous and absolutely preposterous.
All right.
And we take exception to this particular.
All right, so that's the man in charge of communications, HR, at the JOSPONG group of companies responding to the findings that were made by Manasseh Azore Awene in the JoyNews investigation about the district assemblies and waste management that's been going on. Well, they issued a rejoinder which also contained a threat. Obviously, it looks like they are not interested in the threats. They have just published the rejoinder, as in Joy has just published the rejoinder. They say that the claim that the price for the 1 million bins, that contract was inflated, cannot be correct. Now, they are supplying at a rate of $60 per piece to be paid at the prevailing Bank of Ghana interbank rates. And then they're also supplying 900,000 pieces of biodegradable bin liners at $15.60 per piece. The total contract sum is 74,000 plus United States dollars. And that was to be pre-financed by the 5 companies that have been discovered to all belong to one entity within a flexible payment period of 24 months. Well, it does appear 1 year has already gone and the supply has not started. I am asking when they would get to supply and get paid then. Then they also say that the allegations that it must be placed on record that none of the 5 companies has supplied any item under the contract and neither has any payment been made by the Ministry of Local Government to the companies. Yes, so that is to be understood now. And then they say that splashing pictures of waste bins, that Joy has splashed pictures of waste bins that are found in the assemblies and have not been distributed, and they are going waste. In the meantime, there's a new contract to supply more, and that could not be understood. They say That is unfortunate because the waste bins are needed and they are currently in the process of producing them, and they will be made available to the assemblies. There are specific responses that we will make to some of these allegations as we begin the discussion. Thank you very much. So now, start with Mr. Bentil once again, that what we know now is that in November 2014, the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development awarded a contract for QualiPlus Limited to produce and supply 155,000 waste bins for distribution through the assemblies. The cost per waste bin was 120 Ghana cedis and 15 Ghana cedis for transportation per waste bin. VAT was calculated and added to the final cost. The Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development took delivery of 100,000 of those and in 2015, and the company sent them to the assemblies for distribution. Many of the assemblies have still not finished distributing these waste bins. Some of them, Tema, Pando, and a couple of others. Now, they are saying the reason they are unable to distribute these waste bins are that some households do not generate waste, so they prefer portable waste containers, which children can carry to the communal container sites to dump and to pay a token. Now, for such households, the 220-liter bins are not needed. Some of the assemblies also say the households which took the waste bins were supposed to pay Zoom Lion to discharge their waste. So those who could not afford to pay stayed away from taking them. JoyNews investigations also discovered that private waste management companies gave free waste bins as incentives to get customers to subscribe to their services. So some of the households that could afford to pay for the services of the dustbins already had some, so they did not need the government waste bins any longer. So a host of reasons have been given. So whilst as it is now, a good number of those waste bins have not been distributed. 54,500 of those waste bins are yet to be supplied, whilst those that have already been supplied are going waste and getting perforated around the assemblies. The government in 2016 September decided to procure yet 1 million waste bins for distribution to the households, and this was done under a certificate of urgency. As we speak, the distribution has not started. They say they are in the production stage.
It's disheartening, I'm telling you. I mean, I happen to have seen this information a bit earlier, and I was beside myself with grief. Samson, it's classic create, loot, and share of the worst kind. And you know, there are facts and then there are explanations. And if you're trying to explain something to an intelligent person, at least you make an effort to sound credible. If you listen to some of the explanations, they are so incredible, they are so silly. You don't know how a sane government official makes that decision. Look, I'm just going to take just an example of what you've read, because there's so many details about this thing, we can't go into it. One, they said, oh, we bought the waste bins, but we could not distribute 100,000. And then the question is, why couldn't you distribute? They said, because some households don't generate waste. Jesus Christ. I mean, how do you say that to an intelligent person? And then you say, oh, because some households prefer a different kind of waste bin. So if you went and ordered the waste bins, didn't you check what they were using? And if you're going to try and procure something for them, didn't you find out what they would use or want? How do you buy something and then later say they didn't want that one?
For some of them, they stopped supplying them because they were they were using the waste bins as water containers. Yeah. And so what the assemblies decided was to perforate them before they send them to them.
So exactly the point I'm making, that which government official sits down and decides to make a procurement based on his own whims? without any check of what the people need, what solution he's trying to provide, and how he's going to apply that government money to solve the problem. All right? Then they make a counterintuitive explanation and say people don't want the waste bins because they will have to pay for it. And then they come back and say that, well, they prefer the free waste bins given by the private waste collectors because it's an incentive for them to use the services of the private waste collectors, who they pay for. Which is why I started by saying this is a classic create, loot, and share scheme. Look, there was no need for it. I'm not saying there's no need for waste bins.
The local government minister then, Collins Dauda, and the chief of staff, you're questioning their wisdom, and the procurement agency for approving what they said was urgent because it was going to rain and cholera will set in.
I am saying here, and I'm questioning their wisdom, I am questioning their capability to be in office. I am questioning what went into that decision making, which led them to use public funds to procure these waste bins, which they knew they couldn't distribute, which they knew the people didn't want, and which they later found out to be more or less incapable of being used within those communities. How did they arrive at that conclusion? And I am saying that this is contrived. It is what the judge called a create, loot, and share scheme. Because they're claiming by their own explanations that the fact of their acquiring that set of waste bins, okay, that fact, okay, and the fact of their inability to distribute it is born out of another fact that they didn't check what was required. And they went ahead and did it. Now, to buttress the point I'm making unequivocally is this. After failing to distribute the 100,000, you go out and procure 1 million at a higher cost. For what? And then you come back and tell us that, well, this time I'm talking about JOSPONG. It is on, I suppose it's JOSPONG who is saying that it is on a certificate of urgency, that you need these things so urgently, that you proceed to acquire them. Look, you have a bin liner, that's a plastic bag you set in the bin for $15 point something, which is 60 cedis plus. I mean, are you kidding me? All right, so please, it's not as mild as saying I'm questioning somebody's competence. This country is saddled with leaders who just enrich themselves in these crazy schemes that turn your head.
This country is saddled with preventable cholera. And a minister and a chief of staff and procurement entity decide that we'll open, some bids for companies to come in. And the company that come in, 5 of them, what is the crime that they belong to one bigger company? They are subsidiaries of one bigger company. And they are supplying the bins to stop people from dying from cholera.
So this country is saddled with cholera.
Yes.
If you ask anybody with basic learning, they will tell you how cholera is created, how it can be prevented, and all those other things.
One human life is worth more than $74 million.
Is this the solution? 2 things. Is this the solution to cholera? That's one. And then number 2, if you're trying to solve cholera and you're going to apply the solution, is this the way to apply it?
Our country is filthy.
What? But I was going to make a point about cholera and how we should use this money to solve these problems, and the fact that we are a country that ends up spending stupendous amounts of money trying to solve problems, and after we spend those monies, the problem still persists.
Okay, hold on briefly. Yes, Honorable Yunus Afuseni, perusing some of the documents that are before him, I think the biggest question has been the prices involved. Then attached to that is what Kofi raises. You procure things you don't need.
Well, there are more than 1 million households in Ghana.
Certainly.
They would have done some initial evaluation before they settled on 1 million. And the 1 million includes the first 100,000. The total number to be supplied was 1 million. But I'm surprised at Kofi. He says this is a scheme of
create, loot, and share.
Kofi, you just told us a few minutes ago that if we don't have evidence to make an assertion, don't make it.
Some few minutes ago. Why it is so.
So now you're saying that this is a crazy scheme of create, loot, and share. You see, and I like Kofo's exhortation in Kekos. Don't convict before you prosecute. And we are want to doing that as Ghanaians. This scheme, was generated at the Ministry of Water Resources, Works and Housing. No, the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development. It went through all the motions, Kofi. We established institutions to make sure that we have value for money, and their institutions are there. You're not saying that this contract was awarded by the absolute discretion of the minister. You're not saying that. You are holding the minister responsible. You're saying that they created a scheme to loot.
And I'm explaining
Meanwhile,
we spent all this money, did all these things, and left them to rot.
You just displayed a letter on the screen where they asked for permission to sole source from the PPA, an institution of state. Are they part of the create, loot and share?
Yes, they are.
Then you should say so.
Well, I said
you said the chief director and the minister. I don't think it's a create, loot and share. You see, and I like Emmanuel, I like you when you make points which are founded on genuine concern for your love for this country. If I'm a supplier, the ministry identifies a problem. The problem is waste, how to deal with waste. And I have always believed that waste is a local matter. The assemblies must be properly equipped to deal with waste. That I've even believed that there was no need establishing the Ministry of Sanitation. At the local level, it must be part of the performance indicators, the key KPIs of the Metropolitan Chief Executives and District Chief Executives, so that they dispose of waste. Absolutely. Now, they find me as a supplier to supply beans. 1 million. My duty ends when I supply the beans. The distribution channels must operate. The assemblies must give the beans out and ensure that people put their waste in those beans and deploy vehicles to empty those beans.
Something on the point of order, please.
On the point of order, okay, I'll concede. Yeah,
the discussion had to do with the decision itself to do the procurement and the agency with which it was done.
I'm taking everything.
Hold on. No, you shouldn't, because we are doing an analysis. No, hold on. And I think it's important. I haven't mentioned JOSPONG yet.
Yes.
The reason is because where you are going. Look, I think that business people take opportunities. They are predators.
Yes.
So if you create that opportunity,
they will take it.
They will take it. So please, let's separate the discussion.
So take it.
When we come to talk about JOSPONG, we'll talk about it. But
yes.
my worry is with government officials and how they create these things and end up not using them, go through the processes you are talking about, and not solve a problem.
Thank you.
Spend the money anyway.
From the premise which I said that
so
there are more than
1 million. Don't conflict them. Don't conflict them.
I have a home. I've got waste bins. They are not from the Medina La Contana District Assembly. I bought them from the service provider.
Okay.
And every month I pay a service charge.
Right.
Because I want my refuse to be emptied. I bought them more than the amount that they have said they sold it out.
The rationale for the project, you could see, is that when the bins are distributed to the households free, then they'll be encouraged to put it there, and then the service providers will come and collect them at a fee.
At a fee.
Right.
At a fee. And that is what, because you generate the waste. So you must pay for the waste to be disposed.
Right.
Because we don't pay for it. That's why behind your house, someone can be living in the next house and throwing his refuse through a window or over a wall.
$60 per bin.
Yes, I was saying.
And
what I'm saying is that
15 over $15 per liner. Are you okay with that?
Well, I didn't buy liner, but I bought a bin. I've got 2 in my house.
Okay.
And the total was more than $60 per page.
Okay. What about where the investigator brings out the fact that this was from your own company? The pro forma invoice that you submit for the cost of this bin is not $60.
It's less than $60?
Yes.
And what accounts for the difference?
The difference, they say they are using virgin material to produce this particular bins.
Well, that is so I presume that they went to explain to the public procurement agency and they accepted this.
As long as the contract is signed.
No. Before the contract, you must get permission before you sign the contract. So I'm prepared to interrogate the process.
Right.
But I'm just saying that, yes, the initiative was laudable. We need to encourage people to responsibly dispose of their waste everywhere in Accra. And then, you know clearly, We know how to prevent cholera, but we're not taking the steps to prevent same. That is the problem.
I need to make a point on this.
Okay.
I've made a point here before. Something, please permit me. In this country, when we have a big problem, politicians constitute it into an opportunity, okay, to make money for some people, and the problem still remains. We've had chance to speak about this here, okay. So where is the solution to cholera, okay, now?
Okay.
The solution to cholera should be how to deal with our sanitation.
With 70-something million, we could have dealt with cholera without going through this process.
Let me quickly go around and come.
That's the approach.
Let me quickly go around and come. And Kweku, I don't know how you also take it that the process is being faulted also because the bids were not opened, as it were, for all of this to start with, so that at least you'll be able to compare some prices and be sure that you are getting value for money.
Well, I didn't know this. I thought they said there was competition, but it happened to be among competition of brothers or something.
There was no. The information is that, sorry, something, maybe you should do. The chief of staff wrote to the local government minister and says, procure 1 million beans. Local government minister reportedly writes to PPA and says, it's urgent. In the dry season. And says the rains are coming.
And so
at the time when the first purchase and distribution has not completed.
Yes, the broader point I want to make is that both the SNIT software contract and the issues being raised in relation to this Benz contract throw light on the attitude of public officers in how we spend public money. It is so hurtful.
Thank you.
Sitting in the Ministry of Finance and you were seeing the need and how desperate you are every time looking for money to pay for to make one payment or the other. And sometimes you see the wastage in departments of government, you can't believe it. And it's so hurtful. I think we should begin to, and I think on this one, Multimedia has done good work on the SNIT one. We should begin to mention the individuals involved. We should begin to review the processes that led to the award of these contracts, because by our practice, if a contract is giving out on sole sourcing, there must be value for money audit. We must ask for those things. If those things were not done, we should move to prosecute public officers who do these things. My joy with the discussion today is that in the past, I think it has been a bit about the private company involved and letting it look like it is not those, if you don't need bins, and somehow either because you were persuaded by somebody or not, you make a decision that we need bins.
What decision?
How could the procurement of bins to deal with waste management be such an urgent need that it would qualify under a Public Procurement Act for sole sourcing? How could this be? So we should begin.
The circumstances at the time.
No,
that's what
it
I'm
was
asking.
in October.
There
were no circumstances.
The law, I'm coming.
There was no circumstance warranting that. No, it can be proven.
Let me even say this. You see, the law does not allow you to wait. Maybe you need to do something. You wait and wait and wait, and when it is 2 weeks to the time or a month to the time, you say it's their agent. And therefore, the question we ought to be asking is the procurement of these facilities for the purposes of waste management. Will you ordinarily consider it to be an urgent matter? And especially when I'm coming. How do you know? Otherwise,
how do you know that somebody waited?
But I'm saying that you plan your waste management. You plan your waste management. You plan your waste management strategies beforehand. You plan your budget. Your budgets are prepared beforehand. So, at what point did that feature in the budget statements? And if not, in general, the waste management plans of, say, local government, where this didn't sit until some 2 weeks to the rains, and then we all of a sudden realize that this is part of our plan.
And it's a district assembly
So what
issue.
I'm saying is that we should go through the very details of how the procurement was done and then begin to prosecute human beings so that in future when we are all making decisions,
we should go through how the procurement was done, interrogate the process, and anybody found culpable will be prosecuted.
That is fine. That's what I mean. That's what I mean. It's okay. It's okay. But both this and the SNIT contract clearly tells us that, and it reflects the point we have been making. That look, this country, we are not that poor.
We are not that poor.
We are not that
We are not poor.
And you see these wastages that is bound to happen. And as I said, it is good we focus on the public official. Well, as for the private man, if I give you if I give you price and you are willing to do it, if you don't need something, you come telling me you need it, I'll give you price. So and then I should not be made to pay for your wrong decision. Right. Just hold on a minute, and you and Yao, I don't know. Like he said, they are out there to make profit. This is business they are doing. So even if their own company, which also sells these bins, as late as December 2016, June 2017, and August 2016, quote the price per waste bin at 150 Ghana cedis. And yet, what is being sold to government is 258 Ghana cedis. The bin liners, they quote them presently at 0.98 cedis. And what is being sold to government now is 67 cedis. That's the $15.6. If the government has been willing and accepted that, why should that be anybody's problem?
Oh, that's a very
Samson, you have forgotten one thing. All these contracts were pre-financed.
They were supposed to be
pre-financed. So you are not talking about cost of financing.
Yes, they were supposed to be pre-financed. It hasn't happened,
so it hasn't been
pre-financed. And it has not started yet.
Well, I'm talking about
in a period of 2 years.
At the time of the contract.
In a period of 2 years. Now it hasn't started. The question of the urgency for it is doubtful. But when it is about to start, you would see that almost the 2 years have gone. So what is it?
Yes, so, but the point really is that when matters like this happen, let's go to the contract.
Okay.
When the contract stipulates terms, covenants, they must be complied with. Oftentimes, we tend to blame a victim or someone being victimized by the state when the state has entered into an agreement. And for example, you realize later that the portion did not comply with the laws of Ghana. Then the private person gets victimized. When the Attorney General, who is the custodian of the law, has assured the person in the contract that we have complied with all the laws. I think that once we have a duty to ensure that we reduce or even prevent wastage as citizens, we must hold public officers responsible for actions like this. I think the financial and now even the Auditor General can come in now and say charge some of those who are public officers. That links to the SNIT one. When you look at the SNIT law, institutional representatives, a number of them, the president appointees, they are there. 2 representatives from Employers Association.
Mentioning president appointees so that I don't forget, I had referred to the gentleman Alhaji Alidi, who had made derogatory comments about women, particularly their forcing, and people were outraged about it during the Mahama administration. I referred to him as an appointee at the time. I'm told by Samuel George, the MP, that he wasn't an appointee. He was only a parliamentary candidate.
Okay. So you have 2 persons nominated by the president on Senate, 2 representatives for Employers Association, 4 organized labor, TUC, I hope they are listening, 1 rep Pensioners Association, 1 rep Ministry responsible for finance, 1 rep Security Services who is not a member of the armed forces, and then the Director General. These people are responsible for the management. And then on top of it, we have the authority, also composing of people from all areas branches of the economy and so on. When they take decisions like this,
don't pack your things. We have a brief extension for you to be able to finish your points.
Thank you. When they take a decision like this, and it is sanctioned and approved by the authority, now all we do now is to hold responsible an employee who was instructed, whose actions are approved by the board. I'm not saying the individuals are not responsible for their actions, but that should not be exclusive of these trustees. The simple concept of trust is that they are responsible for the management of the subject of the trust as if it is their own property. So the first question, ordinary question, would you have invested such huge amount of money in such frivolity like this if you were managing an inheritance left for you for your father and your siblings?
You said this is
frivolity.
fiduciary
relationship
that is the word.
with the people. And so they must be held responsible.
How do you hold them responsible?
You can hold them responsible if you interrogate the process.
How? Wait. Since you seem to find this unconscionable, you call it frivolity. Even though you have said punish people after their facts, after those who were involved, the state actors.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that.
You said we seem to blame.
So you can use
the entities rather than the people who assisted to do the contracts and everything, who are in government, the PPA people who also approved them and all of that. If you find it to be frivolous and unconscionable, why not stop it now? Rather wait for everything to be consummated and then you go and punish people.
That is the other point I'm coming to. And we as beneficiaries, have we ever demanded SNET?
Yes, we have.
To publish to us, and when they failed, and then I think you went to court once, you don't have to stop there. In actual fact, I think that, with all due respect, the course of action that was taken to court, a different course of action, but based on the same facts, can be upheld by the court.
Exactly. You remember we treated this matter.
Yes, of course.
I told you in here that the way you were going to court, it was unlikely that you would succeed.
Yes. So
I get it, but if you want to go there, you see, this is why we went to court.
Yes.
And there were many causes of action. But we went fundamentally because SNIT is a trust.
Yes.
You and I know it's set in trust law.
Yes.
You have trustees.
Yes.
And it is a matter of equity.
Yes.
It is not pure hard law.
Yes.
So we're going to say, if the trustees are the people doing this to you,
yes,
then the court
you
must
probably
have...
need the Kenyan Supreme Court.
Well, yes, so that's why I'm saying that. And I agree with you. I agree with you. For me, okay, I'm both pained and vindicated that. Pain because this is what we sought to prevent.
You didn't take a cue from Andrew Awuni, who went to court over SNIT, and he was told to be a busybody. He should shut up and allow the shareholders and the trustees.
And now here we are. But it vindicates what we're trying to do because this would have been prevented. And I agree with you. We ought to get back to SNIT. What we are talking about is because the whole thing is dysfunctional.
SNIT?
Yes.
No, I don't think so.
It is.
You see, even in all this, the authority has a supervisory role over even SNIT because their recommendations have to be approved by the authority under the Pensions Act. And so it doesn't even stop with SNIT alone. For me, anybody who has failed to perform his function must be held accountable. When monies have been lost, we should make sure they pay and refund this money. I mean, when you get your paying slip and a lot of money has been deducted.
So we will take a break here. We'll take a final break here and return to continue with the discussion briefly on SNIT, and also there are the ethnocentric comments, as it were, that were made that has led to a deputy minister losing their job. Of course, the critical question will also be asked when we are out of the IMF. It does look like we can't have a definitive date. When we return, the SNIT matters, you know, they now cascade into how we need an explanation as to how the 80% shares in Merchant Bank appear to have now reduced to 5%. How SNIT is also sinking millions of pensioners' funds into some unprofitable ventures. That is Kofi Bentel's words. We'll be right back.